we will chat with Abhishek Paul, Culture Shepherd at Kissflow. Kissflow is a leading global SaaS company. It offers the first unified digital workplace for organizations to manage all their work on a single unified platform. Abhishek is exploring new and innovative ways in aligning core values of the business to every people, policy, and practice. Thus, he is creating a purpose-driven, high-performance work culture. He is also closely working with one of the main core values at Kissflow, which is happy employees create happy customers. Abhishek is an MBA. He is currently pursuing his PhD in HR and organizational behavior at IIT Madras. His doctoral thesis is also quite interesting. It's focused on applying systems thinking principles to create high-performance work culture. That sounds very technological, but that is what you would expect from a tech company like Kissflow, right? Great to have you with us, Abhishek. Thank you for taking time out and joining us.
My pleasure. Good to be here.
Your job title is Culture Shepherd. It's rather unique. You want to just tell us a little bit about what's the thinking behind it?
I think the credit has to go to Suresh. The title came about after a series of conversations on what exactly I was going to do. I had reached out to Suresh saying, hey, I'd worked in large services companies and I realized...
Suresh is your CEO, just for the reference of the audience.
Yeah. Suresh Sambandam is our CEO. So I'd worked in large IT services companies, and all these companies started off very well. But soon over time, with size, they kind of, I would say, lost their way in terms of the people practices. So this is the problem statement I came to Suresh when the company was less than 100 strong. And I said, I want to work with a small company and see if we can scale differently. And out of those conversations is where this designation evolved. It's more than a designation. People ask me, is there a career map for a culture shepherd? I said, no, it's just almost like a statement, right? This is my responsibility. Every time I use the word, I'm reminded of my responsibility. Credit goes to Suresh, though. That's how it came about. It's more
technically, it is basically your work profile is that of the CHRO of the organization, correct?
More or less, yeah. So I take care of talent management, if you want to look at it as a general parlance. But Culture Shepherd kind of makes me think, okay, there's something deeper behind what I do than run policies, practices, and engagement initiatives.
No, it's absolutely critical. Culture, company culture is so very critical, especially when we look at, young businesses like yours, right? And other startups and all that are coming. Culture is still being defined in those organizations, right? Unlike legacy organizations or family businesses where the culture has been there and it's a legacy that has been there for a long time. So it's very critical. So it's good to have people like you, who are shepherding the company culture. But tell us, for the benefit of our audience from an expert's point of view, how would you define company culture? And especially for younger organizations, if you were to advise CEOs and all who are listening to us, what would be the principles of an ideal company culture?
Perfect. We actually have thought this through, and this is one of the things that we do as part of our induction program is when we hear the word culture, people have a lot of different thoughts, right? Maybe from what they've read or what they see on social media, or even TV shows like Silicon Valley and all of that, right? So people, when they see culture, they think, okay, earlier it used to be in services companies, Friday, you have culture programs and things like that, basically just fun engagement stuff. But if culture is going to be the core of how you're going to invest in people and build your people practices, then it has to be more than something you do to just entertain people and make them feel nice. Well, that can be a part of it. It cannot be the whole cultural thing. So we defined our culture is basically a set of values that we believe in, right? And while that can sound very theoretical, the simple way to do that is culture is basically manifested in our daily interactions. How we interact with each other, how we prioritize things, how we reward people. So that actually comes out of what we believe. So we might put on our wall saying, hey, these are our value systems, but culture is basically what is lived out among people. In that sense, it's no different than, let's say, any regional culture, right? Like, for example, we are in Tamil Nadu. So there is a Tamil culture. There is an Indian culture which you hear about. What is it? It's something you feel. It's something you experience. When somebody comes from outside, they experience it. They don't have to know our constitution. They don't have to know our history. Just by interacting with people, they'll say, hey, feels like Indian culture. Same thing is KISSFlow. It doesn't matter what you write there. It doesn't matter what the leader believes. It's what every employee lives out on a daily basis. What we try to do is be intentional about it. There is no perfect culture out there. It has to be contextual. Tamil culture is different from Indian culture, is different from Karnataka culture. There will be similarities and overlap, but you need to be aware of what makes your identity. Not try to imitate somebody else because they are doing well and it's getting a lot of coverage. You be clear on your values and why you're doing what you're doing, and then live it out, right? That's all we say about culture. It will automatically manifest in the way you hire people, in the way you reward people, in the way you promote people, in the way you let people go, right? All of that is outcomes of your culture. It is not independent. Culture is not something you do in terms of the office infrastructure, in terms of the way you dress alone, right? It's far deeper than that. And that's what I'll tell people. First, be clear what you stand for, what is your identity, and then you'll find a way, and then find the way that you're living it out. Is it in alignment with that? That in a nutshell would be culture.
For the larger, longer term benefit of an organization, how important is it, or how critical is the role of a person like you, or senior leaders, because you are the ones who are defining culture, and how can you create a division between the people who are defining the culture and the culture itself? Because it shouldn't happen that tomorrow if you leave KISSFlow and go away, the culture changes, right? The culture should not change regardless of change of personnel. Even the company might be, a company might, acquire another company. Tomorrow you might buy another company. How do you want to retain the culture of the company you're buying? Do you want to impose your culture on them? What is the benefit? But mostly, how do you keep a culture going for long? So if there is a Tata group that has had a certain culture, right, for more than 100 years, and regardless of how many companies there is a common thread in the culture of the group, right? And regardless of whether Ratan Tata is there or not, and so many people have come and gone. How do we keep this going? How do you reinforce, on a regular basis, the cultural values of an organization?
Like most of these questions, there is no one answer to it. There are multiple ways we have to attack this, depending on the size that you are in and what situation you're in. I would say, number one, it's the leadership, right? Like you said, the Tata example, right? The culture of the company comes down from one man's value system, right? And it's and that's around which they still rally around, right? Anytime even in companies like Infosys, you talk about Infosys values, you still go back to Mr. Murthy or Mr. Nandan Nilekani and people like that, right? So that you cannot have a leader who does not buy into a culture. The leader's value system, especially if you're talking about a founder's situation or a long-term CEO situation, he is going to, in a large way, influence the culture, and he has to be hands-on invested in it, right? It's not something he can outsource. He can't say, what, I'll take care of the product or the business or the sales. You guys handle the culture piece.
Okay. Yeah.
That becomes the culture then, right? Culture is not a priority. It takes on, it's more like a means to an end. So the first part is the leader does he or she truly believe in it? And that's the first step. Without it, it's going to be very difficult. The leader might not have the same amount of time throughout the career, but he or she has to be invested in it. The second thing is your culture has to be co-created. It cannot be dictated from above, however good the intentions are. For example, when we came out with our core values, I spent time we were about 90 people. I had 1 hour interviews with about half the population. And the remaining all took a survey. They took a questionnaire and they responded. So 90 people were involved in framing our core values. It's not saying, hey, these values look good, yes or no. Like people were going through and saying, hey, this is what I like about the company. This is what I want to change about the company. This is why I stay here. This is what makes us successful. And hence, out of that came our values. So people have a personal connect, right? Culture is co-created. Your values have to be co-created. It cannot be dictated. And what happens to people who join you later? So that whole thing, you need to kind of keep involving them in. So what we say is, culture is not just something you enjoy. It's something you come in and you add your flavor to it. So we make sure we give them opportunities to not just voice out their opinions, but also make changes to our culture, right? So second part, first leadership, second co-create and collaborate, so that culture is always evolving. We are not dogmatic. We don't say, hey, this is how we do things. You need to either buy into the plan or head out, right? Like, we don't do that.
Okay.
The third thing, which is very important, is culture has to have rituals, right? You cannot have an induction and posters around the wall and then all of that. You need to have weekly rituals. So for example, every Friday, which is today, 5:30 to 6:30, we have something called G2G, Good to Great. Entire company comes together. We have some fun where we introduce new people. We might have some interesting talks by our own people. We'll have quizzes. We'll have competitions. We'll have org announcements. So every Friday, 5:30 to 6:30, we've said no meetings, no questions. Everybody, including the CEO, is there. And we all just come together and just have a time of interaction. So like this, we have multiple rituals within the company that just makes culture as important as your work. Right? It's not something that is a HR mandate. It's not something you do once a quarter in an offsite. It is part of the thing. And the understanding is things happen slowly. Right? Like, you learn to understand, fall in love with the place rather than remember some values and try to memorize it.
Right.
Yeah. The final thing is what we are doing now, which is possibly sharing our story and just saying, hey, this is who we are, and just making people proud of it. Right? This is something we believe is not perfect, but we value it and we want to protect it. So we try to showcase it and get more people involved in the conversation.
I love having this conversation, and I'm really enjoying this conversation with you. And I know there are some other specific questions, but I just can't help be a little greedy, and ask you some, because you've been at larger organizations like Infosys and others, where they are multinational organizations, multifunctional, multi-department, very complex organizations, and even KISSFlow, operates in has its presence in across 160 countries. And then there are the smaller organizations which are like, the new startups and the other businesses. How do you reinforce company culture in an organization that is spread across so many geographies? Right? If you have I don't know whether you have sales presence across 160 countries. You probably don't, but you are also digitally connected to a lot of these areas. But Infosys and the other places that you have worked at, they have physical presence in multiple geographies, and like even within those geographies there are multiple locations, right?
Mm-hmm.
Is it possible to have a common company culture?
I think the short answer is, again, it goes back to what you mean by culture, right? Like, if culture is values, you will have those values. I mean, you have to go to Infosys, what their values are. Now, those values we believe are universal human principles, right? Obviously, the way they express those values will be different, or the priority of those values will be different, depending upon the cultural background of that particular country or whatever. But I don't think, for example, if you look at KISSFlow's values, right, like one of us, it is bias to action, which basically says use good judgment, take action. If something hits the fan, I don't know how much I can be free with my language, seek forgiveness, right? Don't have to worry about, okay, I have a great idea, who do I run it to? Can I run to my manager, ask his permission? No. Right now, bias to action can be, you might say, is a universal principle. You can apply it in any country. But you might say, hey, somebody from a Western hemisphere is more individualistic by nature, so bias to action might come easier for them. Whereas here we are maybe more authoritarian, we seek approval and things like that. So the core, to go back to your question, I think a lot of people try to maintain similarities on the externals when they say culture. Okay, we as a company dress this way. This is how we address people. But they don't try to understand what is the internal, what are the value systems you want them to hold.
Right.
So irrespective of how they express it, in whatever language, whatever cultural background they come from, you will still feel, hey, I feel, it's like, okay, give me an example. It's like if you have family members living abroad, let's say large family members, right? Like extended family and all of that. And you have a family gathering. You come together, you know the accents are going to be different. Some people might have married across nationalities and all of that. Okay. But what makes you that one family is not that you all talk the same language or talk the same way or all of that. You have something at your core which is similar. And that's what connects you. The sad thing is companies, when they grow big, they forget what makes them, what is that core. Right. They are there to get some, the sales team is there to get some numbers done. That's about it. So I don't think it's a problem of how much they've spread. It's a problem of the fact that people aren't intentional about the core, which is understandable also. Once you become too large, right? I think one of the things people have said, it's like trying to turn a ship. You can't just, if you're in a rowboat, you can keep turning and all of that. Once you're in a ship, you can't just turn, right? You'll capsize. Yeah. So then you just have to make sure that the ship is running.
Yeah. So is it possible to quantify and measure company culture? You know, there these days people tend to refer a lot to Glassdoor kind of ratings. Is that a measure? Are there other measures, matrices?
Each term is like, I refer to, I mean, the bad analogy I can use is when Bill Clinton was with Kenneth Starr, right? Like in the famous case. So it depends on what you mean by is, right? What you mean by measure. There are different ways to measure it, obviously. Glassdoor, but like I said, there are multiple measures. Glassdoor is a really good metric, simply because it is done by external people. And that's a good way to do it. We, in fact, value our Glassdoor rating because it gives us feedback, right? Like especially when things don't well, we actually value negative feedback more than positive, because positives people kind of write more often. Negative kind of tells us what's happening. You should also be able to link it to obviously your exits data. If you say you have a good culture, it's not that attrition is bad, it's the kind of attrition you have. See, our culture allocation is basically defined as ensuring we create an environment where high performers thrive. So you cannot have good people leaving, right? Which also means people who are not performing well for a while have to be moved out in a respectful manner. That I know some companies would say attrition number as a whole is bad or good. No, doesn't make sense, right? So what kind of attrition we track, that's another metric. But primarily your performance scores, we run on an OKR model, which is objective and key results.
Okay.
Your business unit should be able to deliver highly on your OKRs. That is a sign of a good culture. You cannot say my engagement score is high, people love me as a manager. We do an internal engagement score every 6 months to a year. People are very happy. They give great ratings and all of that. But you know what? In terms of BU OKR level, we are average. Doesn't cut it. So, in fact, if you go to a YouTube page, there is something called a performance philosophy where Suresh again has spoken about, articulated this.
Okay.
He said a culture is created to create an environment where high performers are happy delivering high performance.
Okay.
Yeah, you need to be happy, but your happiness comes not because people are giving you perks or fantastic office space or taking care of you and all of that. You get to do stuff that you can't do in other companies, and yeah, that gives you a kind of fulfillment. So that happiness comes from becoming, like you said, right? Like, where have you heard culture shepherd?
Yeah.
You get that here.
That's right. Yeah. I've heard a lot of titles, but I haven't heard this one.
Yeah, I mean, those things happen, and that should give you a sense of responsibility, happiness, and that's what we create here, right? Those opportunities, So okay. Just coming back, yes, there are metrics on engagement, exit, and all of that, but ultimately, your performance scores also as an organization should track.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Fantastic. So if you, on average, an employee spends about 40% of her waking hours at work, right? So now an organization culture in that sense, given the kind of time that we spend, is really extremely important for their own sort of happiness, and satisfaction from life. So tell us about how KISSFlow does this. How do you create a vibrant culture that boosts employee happiness?
Okay. I actually think people spend about almost 70% of their waking hours. If you sleep 6 hours a day, let's say it's 18 hours, 10 hours in office on average, including commute and all of that. I think it's 2/3 of your waking hours at a minimum should be in office. These days it's more because people are not able to switch off.
Yeah.
So your question is, how does KISSFlow?
Yeah. How do you create this vibrant culture, that boosts employee happiness?
Okay. So again, it cannot necessarily be done from the top, right? As much as we would like it, we are not gods granting boons from on high. What we do is, and this is what Suresh keeps saying is, number one, people don't understand the power they have, right? If I am an individual or a leave alone a manager, I can do more to influence my team members than the CEO or the people ops team can do. Right. So our job is, number one, making people aware that, hey, their daily happiness depends more on what you do, how you do things, than anything the company can do. So what the company can do is equip these people and give them the authority also. A lot of people are leads and managers in name, but they can't take any decision. I've noticed this in a lot of companies. Somebody comes up with a serious issue, say, you know what, I can't do it, we'll have to talk to HR. Or no, I can't do it, we'll have to talk to the department head. So sooner or later, the guy is going to figure out you're a lead or a manager just for approving my leaves and things that don't matter. Anything that matters. So I wouldn't blame the lead or manager there. I would say that the company hasn't really trusted them and given them the authority or the responsibility to take. So what we do is we try to give as much as decision-making power to the people, both for a product and for a people, right? We say people closest to the problem are best placed to solve it. So you're dealing with people on a daily basis, you need to have the authority to make decisions, right? Okay, somebody needs a cab, you arrange it, you don't have to go through admin, they will facilitate it, you figure it out. Somebody needs to work from home, you figure it out, right? We will only track you on how we are meeting the metrics. We are not going to ask you all of these questions. So I think what we try to do is keep teams small, self-contained, so they manage their daily work. If somebody is stressed out one day, they need time off, the manager has authority to do that. So in that sense, their daily work and everything is contained, like they're almost like a small family unit, right? They don't have to worry about anything. And as KISSFlow, our whole job is ensure that these people are given the knowledge, authority, and all of that to keep their team happy, right? So we have broad boundaries and principles as a company, but we try to almost have like a federal structure. You guys figure out what works for you. And if somebody is really unhappy, we'll step in, but otherwise we know you can sort it out.
Right.
Once people have that level of control, we call it autonomy, right?
Yeah.
Once they know, hey, I have this level of control over my daily schedule, my daily work, and my career, half the problems are solved.
Right. This is such a nice point you make, because I realize that even for larger organizations where there are functions, and within the functions there are smaller groups, even within those groups, if there is not empowerment of the manager, then it becomes a very difficult issue to manage the company culture. And then there would be microcosms of different subcultures within even those smaller groups, right? So
I think we need to clarify between what is efficient. See, when you run large companies, you need to have certain structures in place for efficiency and process adherence. So a lot of these smaller breakups that you see are not done for the good of the individual or the teams. It's basically done so that you can manage and have fairness across the system. Right. So when what is fair for the system is unfortunately unfair for the individual.
Yeah.
So we are trying to buck the trend. So let's see.
It's a difficult balance to maintain. Yeah,
absolutely.
Okay. I'll just ask you one last question. Hiring ever since COVID and lockdown and everything happened, hiring has become a difficult thing to do. The point of having somebody sitting in front of you and you can feel the vibes of the person, whether apart from answering your questions about, tell me about your background and, answering a technical question, you also get a feel of the person sitting in front of you, whether he's going to work or not, if he has the right attitude, is he reacting in the right way. And so tell us a little bit about remote onboarding, because that is now, the thing that is happening. So how have you cracked it? It will be useful for the people who are listening in also to take some tips from you on that.
Absolutely. I think hiring is one thing that we tend to underestimate. Unfortunately, at least in India, as far as I know Amazon has done some great sessions where they've shared their hiring practices. But people, by and large, think you can, and I don't blame. I think the responsibility, or you can understand where they're coming from, because the IT services companies pretty much just go to colleges, hire anybody irrespective of their background, and say, 3 months, 6 months, I can train you into an engineer, right? So that mindset has seeped into everybody, where they think, doesn't matter, chalta hai, you come in, if you have first class and no arrears, doesn't matter who you are, you're all the same to me. I'll just train you, right? So
like assembly line.
Sorry, absolutely. I mean, it's very sad. And somehow that mindset has seeped into everybody. They think hiring is just a numbers game. So what we talk about, and this is an idea that initially 4 years ago when I joined, I'd spoken to Suresh and said, culture is only two things, right? One is performance management, how you manage performance. Mm-hmm. Number two, and performance managing includes learning as well. And number two, and critical lever which people underestimate, is hiring. You don't crack hiring, you can't do anything. You're going to constantly throw money at the problem, or have bad people inside and you're trying to figure out how to manage them. It's going to create chaos, bad or average. So this hiring is called, and I credit Laszlo Block, the former CHRO of Google, for this, right? He's called this front-loading your people investment. I love that concept. It made so much sense, which is you put most of your money and resources and time into finding the best talent, not in giving them training, learning, and all of that. All of that has to happen, but the maximum has to be in the beginning. And it's true, right? And the analogy that immediately struck me when I heard that was about a marriage, right? Everything goes into finding the right person. After that, you guys can figure stuff out, right? And sadly, after that, if you've married the wrong person, anything you do after that is going to be quite difficult.
Yeah.
But the problem was in the beginning, not going through counseling and things like that. So that struck me. So one of the things we cracked is, okay, how are we going to do hiring when we weren't that famous or popular 4 years ago? Mm-hmm. Suresh used to hire interview each and every candidate. Didn't matter if you were a fresher coming in for a sales role.
Oh.
He was the final interviewer. Okay. And he used to do this face to face. When I came in, I sat and observed, what are you looking for? So that was the interview Suresh did was not a functional interview, not a technical interview, though he would do that for senior roles, because that would already be done by the department heads. He would just try to understand the person and see if that person would fit into our culture. And what he told me is, hey, Abhishek, I'm doing all of this by instinct, right? It's in my gut. But it cannot scale like this, because I won't have the time and we're going to hire too many people. We need to find a scientific way for my gut. What my gut is telling me has to be put in a scientific manner. Right. So after observing a lot of his interviews, what we created was something called a value alignment interview. Yes, we have core values, 6 core values. How do you select for that? Depending on the role that a person is applying for, and ensuring that the right people come into the company. So we broke people down into 4 major experience categories: new beginner, individual contributor, team manager, and a leader.
Okay.
So for each level, they will still be assessed on 6 core values, but the questions that would be asked of them would be different, because we believe they're coming in with different experiences, obviously. Mm-hmm. So we do a semi-structured interview. So there are specific questions that we would ask, start the conversation with that, and then we will say, we are asking this question to assess these values. And then we would rate each person on whether they have those values as strongly present, somewhat present, or absent. So once the interview was done, we'll have a rating framework for each individual on how they fare on our core values. They will have a strengths scorecard. They will have an areas of concern, and we will give an overall POV. This level of detailing is done in this final interview, post them clearing their skills and functional experience. And then only then do they get an offer from KissFlow, right? And this is shared within the company, so people know it's a semi-structured interview. It's not like if you know the question you can crack it, right? Like you and I are talking, I'll just keep talking with them. Sooner or later, the true person comes out, right? Like Hercule Poirot says, right? His only trick is to allow people to talk. Right? You can only bluff for so long. Now, that has helped us identify people and also tells people, hey, we are not hiring a resource for a role. We are hiring a talent, and the talent can expand and do things in the company for years, right? And we need to understand that talent or that person. So that's how we did hiring. So for us, if you ask me honestly, sitting face to face or over remote really is not the challenge. The challenge, like I said, again, is clarity. What are you looking for?
Right.
Sometimes if you're looking face to face, you can get put off or favorably look at how the person is dressed, how they carry themselves. All of that is immaterial, right? That's what we say, hey, we look for clarity of thought, not clarity of communication, unless you're in sales. I don't care if you don't speak English, if you don't have engineering background. Can you do the job? Do you align with our values? That's the only thing we look for, but we are very particular about it. So I think a lot of companies fail to do that. And so people also just come in, they say, okay, I've hired for this role, I'll do this. That is not part of my job description. Or they say, I'm actually interested in something else, but I'm only doing this. So you actually lose out on the person.
Yeah.
Right? Because you're only looking at that person as a resource to do a role.
Yeah.
And you just try to squeeze as much as possible. Whereas we look at our interview as a key. What we say is each person has a different key. You need to find that key and you'll unlock, and that person's potential is just going to come out. But you need to find out what that key is. It's not one key for everybody, right?
And so remote onboarding is not as difficult as it sounds.
It is challenging. Are you talking about remote hiring or onboarding?
Both.
Remote onboarding is tougher because obviously that's when you're trying to build a relationship. Hiring is interviewing and selecting. That can be done
more comfortably,
even digitally. Onboarding is more of a relationship. The relationships obviously digitally are more tougher. There we just try to be intentional, schedule a lot of interactions. What used to happen, you just bump into somebody over coffee and all, doesn't happen. So you need to be intentional, put it in their calendar, make sure they get to meet multiple people and all of that, right? So that is more of a intentionality issue rather than anything else. But hopefully we've moved to remote plus now, which means 1 week in a month, those who are comfortable come to office. So that's helping things. Yeah.
Terrific. Abhishek, really nice speaking with you, and thank you so very much for giving us time for this interview. And wish you all the best. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Rakesh. Thank you.
Goodbye.